Hey, it's James from 4x4 Earth, and welcome to episode 33 of the 4x4 Earth podcast, Four-Wheel Driving with Ron Moon.
Join James from 4x4earth.com as he learns all there is to know about four-wheel driving, camping, fishing, and getting out and exploring our great country on the 4x4 Earth podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed our last episode, which was driving the Canning stock route with Phil Bianchi. Now, really lucky to have gone from such a great experienced four-wheel driver onto someone with a similar sort of pedigree. So, super excited to be interviewing Ron Moon. Ron has been four-wheel driving for a very, very, very long time, and he's had a really illustrious career. Not only that, he has driven all over the world. So, lots of questions to ask Ron, and let's find out some of the really interesting stories he's got about four-wheel driving around the world. Hey Ron, welcome to the show.
It's good to be there, mate. Good to be there.
Excellent. First off, we'll get through our usual questions. What four-wheel drive is it that you drive?
Got a couple of cars here in Australia. Got a GU Patrol, a 2001 model. It's been worked over pretty well. I just picked up about a year or so ago a 79 series dual cab cruiser, and over in the States we have a Dodge Ram 2500 with a slide-on camper. What's the Ram like? Well, it's a bit different. I guess it's probably not as capable as the cruiser or the Patrol, but it's a great touring vehicle, and it fits in over there. I mean, there's so many of them, it's unbelievable. So, and it carries the camper pretty well, and cruises effortlessly on the freeway and does the four-wheel driving we like to do over there.
Oh, awesome. Which one do you drive most in Australia?
Obviously, I've had the Patrol for a long time, and it's a pretty well set up rig, and that's been my favourite truck for a long time. And I'm building up this 79 series cruiser, and I've got to learn to love it yet. But it's a good truck and all that sort of stuff. But it is a truck compared to the Patrol.
Yeah. Yep. So on the Patrol, what sort of mods have you done then?
Oh, mate, I guess I've stuck everything on it. All the normal stuff. But I guess the big thing I done when it was about 100,000 Ks, I got it cut and stretched by crowd conversions up in Queensland. Stretched the chassis 600mm and made it into a dual cab ute, and then fitted a candy camper to it and all that sort of stuff. So it's been pretty well worked over. I mean, it's got dual shocks on the back, and a fair bit of work done on the turbo and all that sort of stuff, and dual batteries and super low range transfer box from Mark's 4-wheel drive, and it's got a fair bit of stuff on it.
Yeah, the guys from Mark's, they do a good job, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a great truck, and it does everything really well. I mean, it's no mountain goat. I've had it up in the mountains for the last couple of trips, and you notice it on the tight turns in the mountains, or on the ramp over on the steep whoop-de-doos or whatever. But it still does everything and does it pretty well.
Cool. So mud, snow, sand, or rock, which is your favourite kind of driving?
Well, look, I guess I'm at home on sand. I do a lot of sand driving, whether that's on beaches over in Robe or down in Tassie or whatever, and a lot of stuff up in the desert country, of course. And I really love doing cross country stuff, on a GPS and compass bearing and all that sort of stuff, trying to find points of historic interest. I don't like mud very much. That just ruins oil seals and all that sort of stuff. We love the Red Rock over in Utah. That's just one of our favourite destinations. We're going to be over there very soon. And while we live in Victoria, I don't go up the snow very much. I've probably only been up the snow in Victoria or in Tassie or in New Zealand when I've been shooting videos or whatever. We tend to stay away from it. Having said that, we've driven the ice road in northern Canada back a couple of years ago, which was absolutely fantastic. But normally I stay away from snow.
Oh, wow, yeah. So what's your favourite track and why?
Mate, I've got a few, I guess. Look, I've just come back from the High Country. In fact, since January, since the New Year, I've had 4 trips up into the high country. 2 of them were of 2 weeks duration. And the last one was a gourmet food weekend, which was pretty good. But I guess one of the most challenging tracks up there is Billy Goat Bluff. It's ever changing. It's fairly easy at the moment, but it won't stay like that. And having said that, it's never easy as such, but it's easier than it's ever been for a long time right at the moment. But it's still a fairly exposed track. I mean, people freak out a bit, because you're on a very narrow ridgeline at one section and drops off sheer on both sides. So it's a pretty interesting track. Some of the harder tracks up there in the Victorian High Country just take me into some really fabulous places. Limestone Creek track takes you into the Davis High Plains, and that's a fairly gnarly track. And of course, at the end of it, you've got Davis High Plains, which is just fantastic. I guess Cape York. I've been to Cape York. I don't know. I stopped counting at 40 trips. So that was a few years ago now. So I've been up there a couple of times, and I guess everybody thinks the OTL and all that sort of stuff, and it's a fabulous trip, but it's getting used and abused a lot of late. So I tend to go further afield or where it's a little bit less remote. Go up to the old coach road, which is between Laura and Maytown in the old goldfields, road. And then you got sort of the desert tracks, which I guess the one I like the most at the moment is the Madigan line across the Simpson. Of all the tracks across the Simpson, Madigan line is really enjoyable. It's used enough so that you don't have any navigation difficulties these days, and the whoopie-doos have been smoothed out a bit, but it doesn't get used enough. It doesn't get used as much as the other tracks, and it's not chopped up like the other tracks. I mean, the French line and the WAA line, I guess the French line more than any other, is really chopped up by the sheer number of people using it. Yeah, but I mean, ask me that question tomorrow, and you probably get a few different answers. But anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah, exactly. What's the hairiest moment that you've had 4-wheel driving, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I've had a lot of little things happen over the years, and when you're balancing on a couple of wheels and the vehicle's on the edge of tipping over and all that sort of stuff, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to get out of this, and what's the best way to go, and whether you want to go backwards and forwards or put a snatch strap around the front and get somebody to hang on to it or whatever. But quite a few years ago now, we were going up to the Mitchell River in the southern Cape York to paddle that from up near its source down to, not down to the sea, but down to where it flattens out at Gambula. And I was actually a passenger of a Ford F100 four-wheel drive, and we were going up through the Carnarvon Ranges north of Injune. And we'd been warned about this actual corner. The cops had seen us with the trailer unloaded up with canoes and all that sort of stuff, and they'd walked into the pub and said, are you guys with that vehicle with the canoes? We said, yeah, no, where are you heading? He said, well, look out, watch that corner about 20k out. Real bad one. So sure enough, we were cruising. I was sitting in the middle of this Ford S100, and I'm thinking, this bloke's going a bit quick for this dirt road. Anyway, we got to the corner, and sure enough, the trailer went over first, actually, thank goodness, I guess, and somehow ended up beneath the Ford F100 as we rode it down the cliff. I guess the cliff was about 30 to 40 foot high, and we hit the bottom and sitting on top of the trailer, and the canoe sort of went off like a giant airbag as we landed on top of it, but it cushioned the blow, and the Ford F100 came out of it pretty well, in fact, but the canoes were all stuffed. So I guess the moral of that story was, if the driver's doing a dickhead type of thing, tell him to slow down or whatever, and never underestimate the driving conditions, especially when you're on dirt. You can lose control pretty easily, especially when you haven't driven on dirt before or very much. I guess that's one of the things I've been pushing the four drive associations and that sort of thing to teach people how to drive on dirt, because people don't generally die, driving across a creek or driving up a rutted hill or whatever. You're doing 2 mile an hour or 5 mile an hour or whatever. and if you're under control, it's fairly easy to stay there and you won't get hurt. But driving on dirt is a different thing, and today's most people, don't drive on dirt. I mean, the roads are bitumised, and when I grew up as a kid up in the Tennant Creek up in the Northern Territory and in Quorn in the Northern Flinders Ranges, you only had to go a mile out of town and the roads were dirt. We used to get a lot of dirt road driving. Today, you don't get so much dirt road driving. So it's one of my pet things to, try and get people to learn how to drive on dirt.
So you've got a lot of experience in four-wheel driving and quite an extensive career in four-wheel driving. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your career, some of the interesting things that you've done?
Oh, okay. Look, I joined the Army fairly young, and I started driving around in Land Rovers in about 1966, 67, and by about 1972, I was teaching young diggers how to drive 4x4s and 6x6s up in the Victorian High Country. And then that went on for a while, and we were doing four-wheel drive trips. I bought my first four-wheel drive around then. It was the Jeep Wagoneer.
What corps were you?
And then, what corps?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Ramey.
Okay, cool.
Royal Australian Electrical Mechanical Engineers. I was electronic technician.
Yep.
And that sort of thing, and teaching young diggers how to drive trucks and all that sort of stuff. And then about 1972, I bought a Jeep Wagoneer for myself. And then followed that with a Land Rover Series 3 6-cylinder, which was 2 cylinders worse than a 4-cylinder. And then after that, got into a 40 Series Cruiser and that sort of thing. And then in about 1985, I got out of the Army and we went freelance riding and travelling. And first trip was 3 months in Africa. And that was the start of it. Just before that, in about 83, we'd set up a magazine, outdoor magazine, which we published and ran that for a while. And so we went full-time travel writing and wrote our first guidebook, which was on Cape York in 1984.
Yep.
So, it's been a great time. I mean, we wrote that guidebook on Cape York. We went through 14 editions in 30 years, and we sort of celebrated that a couple of years ago, and sort of then wrote to Kimberley Books, which is the first edition of that, came out in about 1988, 89, somewhere like that. And then we wrote others. At that time, we were writing guidebooks for other people as well, but our own guidebooks we published ourselves and done that for 30 years. And now we sold that business to Hemmer Maps, and now they contract us to do their guidebooks, and we've just finished their guidebook on the Kimberley and Cape York.
Wow, what a great job.
Yeah, well, it beats a real one, I got to tell you. I mean, we've been pretty lucky in that. I guess we've worked fairly consistently towards doing those sorts of things, and I became editor of 4x4 Australia magazine in 1988, and that's a job I held for 15 years. And since then, since about 2001, whatever it was, 2002, I've been their editor at large. So, I've had a long relationship with 4x4 Australia magazine and a long relationship with guidebook writing and publishing and all that sort of stuff. So, it's been good, and it's got us out, and we've travelled most places in Australia, if not half a dozen times or more. So it's been good.
What was it like being the editor of 4x4 Australia?
Look, the magazine world has changed an awful lot, and freelance writing has changed an awful lot. And I guess I'm a glorified freelance writer nowadays more than anything else. We don't publish anything and all that sort of stuff, and so we're freelance writers more than anything. And it's a pretty tough gig to get into these days. Magazines have changed as well. I mean, nowadays magazines have got to have a video content, fair video content to, and a Facebook present and social media present and all that sort of stuff to survive. So it's all pretty interesting stuff. I mean, we've just been away shooting videos for 3 half-hour videos for the magazine and a whole pile of stuff for their social media sites. And we're off again in another week's time to shoot another series up in the desert country. So, when I ran the magazine, it was entirely different to what it is today. And it was a good job, but all my trips were fairly quickly. Then I couldn't afford to be away from the magazine for 2 months or something like that. So everything was a fairly quick trip. I mean, we've done, just for example, we went up to Cape York and paddled the Jardine River. We backpacked in with inflatable canoes in our backpack, walked into the top end of the Jardine River, walked down it until we could start paddling, and then paddled down to the sea. Now, that was about a 5-day paddle trip. We only took 2 weeks from Melbourne to do that. We actually never got to Bamaga or the top of Australia, although we were awfully close. But the closest we got was the crossing of the Jardine. And my brother, he was driving the support vehicle and picked us up at the mouth of the river, and we turned around and went back home. So, everything was fairly rushed in those days, but we've done some incredible stuff.
So one of the things back then, what was it like to navigate? Because, I mean, nowadays, I see a lot of people who don't really have any navigation skills because there's a GPS and they've downloaded some maps. What was it like back then?
Well, it was rather different. I mean, I'd spent a lot of time in the army teaching. I was teaching young diggers how to navigate in the bush and all this sort of stuff on foot. The bush, not bushwalking, but out on military sort of type of patrols. Yep. And everything was paper map based and compass and all that sort of stuff. And you had to count your number of footsteps and keep an eye on the compass and all that sort of stuff, and make allowances if you went around a tree to the left. The next tree you had to go to the right, and otherwise you'd start to drift off to the left or to the right. So when I started doing vehicle-based cross-country expeditions, and probably the biggest one back in those days was the Madigan line, which had no track across it at all. It was dead cross-country. It was 1988. And, I used those same techniques. I'd send the vehicle out to the furthest sandhill I could see and get him to go left or right until he was on my bearing, and then I'd tell him to stay there, and we would drive up to him, and then I'd send him out again and do that. And, so, navigation was fairly tricky. I was out in the desert last year with Dennis Bartel, who was the first person to drive the Madigan line 40 years ago, and he was the bloke who named Big Red. He'd done 60 or 70 crossings of the Simpson Desert and done some incredible stuff out there. But I asked him how he navigated, and he used to say he used to get a bearing, pick a knoll on a sand ridge or a distinctive tree, or I would just look at how the radio antenna would throw a shadow across my bonnet. And he said for the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I would just keep that shadow in that exact same spot as he drove. And then the next leg he'd get out after 10 or 15 minutes, take another compass bearing, and he'd go. Now, that's a pretty rough way of doing it, but he was obviously bloody good at it, because around 1990 or somewhere like that, the South Australian government sent out a number of scientists with sextant-wielding specialists and all that sort of thing to find a whole series of native wells in the desert that had been sort of discovered by David Lindsay back 100 years ago. They never found any of them. Dennis went out there with his navigation technique, and I asked him if he used the sextants, and he said no, I was too lazy to learn. But he found all eight of David Lindsay's wells, and then took the national parks people in there to revisit them.
Wow!
There was certainly a skill involved in it, and today's mapping with GPSs is just phenomenal. Having said that, with a GPS, you know exactly where you are, but sometimes it becomes difficult to get where you want to be.
Yes. Yep.
Been in plenty of places where you know exactly where you are. The map doesn't show you this exact detail that you would like, and you're looking at a sheer cliff or whatever, and you think, okay, well, I want to be down there or a crossover on that hill over there or whatever it may be, and that's what you've got to figure out.
So you've travelled pretty much most of the places in the world, really, haven't you? You've done a lot of four-wheel driving.
Yeah, look, we've done a fair bit. Somebody said to me today, in fact, or yesterday, you couldn't be many places left, and I said, well, I've been to 69 countries around the world by vehicle, and we took 5 years and drove around the world, and we ended up in the United States and North America, and you can only leave a vehicle for 12 months in any one country or any one continent, basically. And that's the same in Europe and all that sort of stuff. So we shipped our vehicle back home and our Nissan Patrol. And that's when we bought the Dodge Ram. We bought the Dodge Ram in the States, and we go back there every year and go touring, whether it's down in Mexico or up in Canada or whatever. But we love the west of the United States.
It's very scenic. I haven't done much. I've been there a few times. I haven't done any exploring, but it's incredibly scenic, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Fantastic. And what I like about it is the incredible variety you get in a relatively short amount of time. You can be up in the snow in amongst pine trees and beautiful lakes and all that sort of stuff. Spectacular country at the top of Yosemite National Park in California. And then within 2 hours, you can be in the middle of the Death Valley, 149 feet below sea level. And it's just that variety. I mean, we were in New Mexico last year, and, we'd be up in the mountains and, it was beautiful and cool and pine trees and lakes and all that sort of stuff. And you go, let's go down to the desert country for a couple of days. And 2 hours later, you'd be down in the desert country in White Sands National Monument or something like that. So, it is phenomenal, and the variety is great. But, what Australia's got is its remoteness, and you can get pretty remote. Having said that, there's an awful lot of people travelling the tracks these days.
There is, yeah. What's the difference between the four-wheel driving scene in the United States and Australia? Like, is it similar to people do those big explorations?
Look, it certainly was vastly different. When I first started going to the States, they would, their four-wheel driving would be like, they would tow their Jeep behind their RV and they would go to an RV park, say in Moab, which I was lucky enough to go to a couple of times for the Easter Jeep Safari, which would be on right now, in fact. And then they would roll the Jeep off the trailer and go for day trips. Now, their stuff is super technical and, really good rock crawling and that sort of stuff, and very, very technical. Whether you're doing the Rubicon Trail in the Sierra Nevadas in Northern California or you're in the Red Rock country of Moab. In fact, I've got an American couple who are down in Tasmania at the moment. They've been up in the High Country, the Victorian High Country, for a couple of weeks, and they rang me up and said, none of these tracks are really technically hard. It might be great driving and all that sort of stuff, but they're not technically hard. And that's very true. We don't have, unless you go onto private property, we have very few technically difficult tracks, not like the States. Having said that, what has changed in America in the last few years, and I guess it's represented most by the overland expos that are happening in Arizona and North Carolina, and people doing what we do more than anything, and that's long-distance touring and in a four-wheel drive vehicle. And they're actually looking at, buying little trailers and putting them behind their Jeep and going off for a week or 2 weeks, going up the Great Western Trail through the United States or whatever. So there is a swing towards more long-distance touring in a four-wheel drive in the States, but it's only small compared to the tough day trips they do in Moab or the Rubicon.
You watch all of those videos where they'll have their Jeeps and they're sort of like climbing up almost sheer cliffs, and you think, like, A, how do they do that? B, why do they do that? And there seems to be so many of them who are doing that as well.
Yeah, look, Moab, if you want to experience one of the great four-wheel drive experiences, go to Moab for the Easter Jeep Safari, or you can go there any time. But, there's thousands of miles of red rock track there. Yeah. And people just go out for the day, and you've got this incredible scenic stuff of red rock in desert country that's like saltbush country you get on the Nullarbor Plain, but there's red rocks and, all this sort of stuff. And then behind that as a backdrop is the La Salle Mountains, the snow-capped and all this sort of stuff. So it's beautiful, beautiful country. And you've got these extremely challenging tracks. Now, some of them are only a mile long and will take you all day. Others, tracks that are, 20, 30 or 40 mile long and will take you a couple of days. But, and they're all spectacular, and they've all got really challenging bits where you've got to climb up a sheer wall and all that sort of stuff. And the last time I was in Moab for the Easter Jeep Safari, I was in this rock crawler and, petrol V8, supercharged, auto box with 3 transfer boxes behind it. So when you went into low, and the 48-inch wheels, 48-inch tyres, when you went into low, and planted the foot, mate, you had so much torque, it was unbelievable.
So, and that's the other question that I've always got about that, is the level of customisation over there is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it is. And they can drive around on the roads in it as well. And you hear people critical of the United States and lawyers and all that sort of stuff, but they get away with a lot more than we do here in Australia. And so you got rock buggies, and you go to Moab and you'll see everything rocking down the street. Rock crawling buggies with completely exposed tyres and all this sort of stuff, and these side by side 4-wheelers that you get here in Australia, but you're only allowed to use on farmland and things like that. Well, they drive them on the open road over there, so they're allowed to get away with a lot more than we do, and it's just phenomenal.
And I guess, obviously we have all of these regulations because it keeps us safe. And I think, we are turning into a bit of a nanny state. But do you think that they've gone too far with the vehicle mods that they allow on the open road?
I don't think so, really. I mean, if you go to Moab, you'll see it every day, those sorts of vehicles. But unless you're in Moab or up around the Rubicon or something like that, or in a destination like that, you probably won't see that. You might see a truck sitting on a pickup, Dodge Ram or Ford F-250 or something like that, sitting on big tyres. But it is pretty rare to see them in places, and certainly if you go to New York or Miami, you'd probably never see them. But you might see them in a town in Texas or in LA once or twice, but that's about all.
So the Rubicon Trail, you've done the Rubicon Trail?
Yeah, the Rubicon, I've only done it once, and it's a 2-day trip. It's only about 23 miles long, 25 miles long, but it takes you 2 days. It's extremely technical, and we drove it in Jeeps, and it was a phenomenal trip. It was absolutely fantastic. I'd love to do it again. My Dodge Ram would not do it though.
That's the thing. A lot of those big American trucks, A, they're wide, and B, they don't really seem that well set up for 4-wheel driving, but they look awesome.
Yeah, and it's something like the Rubicon, really isn't suitable for a 200 series cruiser either. Some of the narrow rock gullies you've got to get down and things like that. It's only small trucks that can get down through them, and Jeep's obviously the answer, and that's where they excel. But the States is fabulous, and we enjoy going over there. But I love travelling here in Australia and doing the Victorian High Country. In fact, while we were driving around the world, we took sort of 5 years to drive around the world. I never went up into the High Country for that period of time, and sort of wandered back there, about 3 or 4 years ago, and went, wow, geez, I've been missing this. That's for sure. It was just magic to be back up there again.
Even after everything that you've seen, you still enjoy coming back to the High Country?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've had people, in fact, this American couple who are in Tassie at the moment, they've spent 10 months travelling around Australia in a very nice Range Rover that they've done up in Olding, burned out in about a 92 Range Rover. And they've spent the last 10 months touring Australia, and after their time in the Victorian High Country, they said this was the best place in Australia that they've been to. And I think that's because it's got challenging 4-wheel drive tracks. It's got some absolutely fantastic campsites beside rivers and up on the snow plains and all that sort of stuff, which you can't get in very few places in Australia. It's got fabulous scenery and all that sort of stuff. So, it's one of the great places in Australia, and I would suggest to people who might scorn Victoria or whatever that they ought to come down and spend a bit of time in the Victorian High Country and just enjoy, this incredible place that's got up there. You can easily spend 2 weeks up there and not come out of 4-wheel drive. And, we were up there just recently shooting a video, and we were 3 days in low range, basically, with we slipped it into high range for a couple of segments, a couple of short sections before we back into low range again. So, yeah, you've got some really good four-wheel driving and some fabulous camping.
Wow, what a whole heap of experience. So we'll stop here. We'll continue on with the next podcast where we're going to talk a little bit more about track access. So we will see you soon. Bye.
4x4earth.com is used by over 200,000 people every month to find great tracks, organise trips, and find out how to better enjoy exploring the great outdoors. There's over 1,000 tracks and 300 campsites ready for you to explore. So check out 4x4earth.com today and sign up to get access to the track information, ask questions, and meet other 4x4 Earthers. Membership is completely free. If you're looking for a good route, check out 4x4earth.com today.